Imagine walking down a crowded street in the year 1880 and realizing with sudden, chilling clarity that something is missing, a fundamental part of the human experience that has been systematically erased from the visual landscape of the city. You see men in top hats, children playing with hoops, and women in stiff, high-collared silk. But you do not see a single pregnant woman. Not one. For nearly 2 centuries, the sight of a woman carrying life was considered a scandal, a biological impropriety that necessitated a total disappearance from the public eye known as confinement. Our story begins not in a place of celebration, but in the shadows of the Victorian era, where the quickening of a child was a signal for a woman's social death. The moment her physical form began to betray her secret, the heavy curtains of the parlor were drawn, the invitations to tea were declined, and she became a ghost in her own home. This was not merely a matter of modesty. It was a rigid social architecture designed to hide the animal reality of reproduction behind a veneer of porcelain perfection. To even utter the word pregnant in polite company was to invite a gasp of horror, leading to a strange vocabulary of whispers where women were in the family way or indisposed, as if new life were a lingering illness to be managed in private. But the human spirit and the demands of fashion are difficult to suppress, leading to the invention of the maternity corset, a terrifying contraption of whalebone and steel designed to crush the growing abdomen into a flat, socially acceptable silhouette. There have been records of doctors in the 1890s pleading with their patients to stop lacing themselves so tightly, warning that the desire to remain visible by appearing unpregnant was literally suffocating the next generation. These women were trapped in a paradox. Stay hidden and lose your mind isolation, or lace up and risk your life to remain part of society. This era of enforced invisibility reached its absolute peak in the mid-20th century, an age we often remember as wholesome, but which was governed by a clinical terror of the pregnant body. In 1952, when Lucille Ball, the most powerful woman in television, discovered she was expecting, the executives at CBS faced a crisis of existential proportions. They didn't just want to hide her. They wanted to pretend the biology of the star didn't exist, eventually relenting only on the condition that the word pregnant never be spoken, replaced instead by the sanitized expecting. The camera angles were manipulated. The costumes were layered with thick wool, and the reality of motherhood was filtered through a lens of extreme caution. But to understand how we fell into this darkness, we must look further back to a time when the world was strangely more honest. In the late Middle Ages and the early Renaissance, the pregnant belly was not a source of shame, but a symbol of immense power and divine favor. We see this in the iconic Arnolfini portrait, where the woman's silhouette is intentionally swollen, her hand resting proudly on a mound of fabric that scholars now believe may have been a padded, fashion belly used to mimic the look of fertility. In that era, appearing pregnant was so desirable that even women who weren't expecting would pad their gowns to achieve the look of a fruitful queen. It was only with the rise of the industrial era and a new, rigid middle-class morality that the body became a site of embarrassment. The shift from the stuffed bellies of the 1400s to the confinement rooms of the 1800s represents one of the most dramatic psychological U-turns in history. By the 1960s, the pendulum began to swing again, but in a way that was equally infantilizing. The fashion of the baby doll era emerged, where pregnant women were dressed in ruffles, oversized bows, and pastel tints, effectively turning grown women into giant children to make their pregnancy feel cute rather than powerful. The real revolution, however, was not televised, it was photographed. In August 1991, the world woke up to a magazine cover that would change the course of history forever. Demi Moore, 7 months pregnant and completely nude, stared out from the cover of Vanity Fair with a look of defiance that shattered 2 centuries of silence. The backlash was instantaneous and visceral. Grocery stores across America treated the magazine like hardcore pornography, placing it behind brown paper wrappers because the sight of a pregnant woman's skin was still considered a threat to public order. But the dam had broken. That single image paved the way for the hypervisibility we see today, moving us toward a world where the bump is no longer a secret to be managed, but a high-fashion accessory to be flaunted. From the sheer fabrics and belly jewelry of modern celebrities like Rihanna to the everyday crop tops of expectant mothers in park, we are living in the first era in nearly 300 years where the pregnant body is allowed to occupy space without apology. This journey from the dark, lonely rooms of Victorian confinement to the bright, unapologetic spotlight of the digital age is more than a history of fashion. It is a history of how we decided that life, in its most raw and physical form, is not a scandal to be hidden, but a truth to be seen. The erasure of the pregnant body was a tool of control, a way to keep women's primary biological power relegated to the domestic sphere, ensuring that the public world remained the exclusive domain of those whose bodies never changed. As we look at the remnants of those whalebone corsets and the censored scripts of old Hollywood, we are reminded that visibility is the first step toward autonomy. The long struggle to simply exist in public while creating life is a testament to the fact that the most revolutionary thing a body can do is refuse to be hidden. We have transitioned from a society that viewed pregnancy as a blessed event that happened behind closed doors to a culture that recognizes it as a monumental human feat that deserves to be witnessed in the sun. This is the story of how we stopped hiding the beginning of us all and finally allowed the most natural sight in the world to become the most public one.